Hello, National Park students. Are you ready to continue our journey across the country? This is Mrs. Pierce, and this is the homework for week 4. We would have studied a different national park this week had we met on Monday, but I'm going to keep that material for when we meet in person, and I'm going to send you this wonderful national park for your homework this week. Can I just say I missed you guys? I really did miss seeing you on Monday, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Let's stay on task and dive right back into the national parks. We're going to take a trip west. We're going to go west to the state of Texas. And if you've ever heard the saying that in Texas it's just bigger, everything is bigger, well, if you haven't heard that, ask your parents. They probably have. This park is called, of course, Big Bend National Park. It is in the state of Texas, and it's in the southwest region of America. If you look here on the map, we started learning in the southeast region. We still have a national park or two to finish in that purple southeast region. So we're moving directly west into that light green region in the big state of Texas. Before we begin, let's start with 2 vocabulary words. You're going to need a 3x5 index card, or if you don't have index cards at home, cut out a piece of paper that's 3 inches by 5 inches and make your own 3x5 card. We have 2 words that you need to bring with you to Monday on class. Our first word is desert. Okay, seems pretty simple, right? I know what a desert is, Mrs. Pierce. Why do we need to learn this? It's really important. First, you need to know how to spell it. Desert has 1 S. Do not put 2 S's in desert. My rule is, if it has 2 S's, it's because you want seconds, and that's for dessert. Desert 1, D-E-S-E-R-T. Also, we're studying desert because a lot of these national parks around our country are going to be located in dry desert areas, and there's a whole ecosystem that takes place in the desert. So, what is the definition of a desert? It is an extremely dry land with little precipitation. That's a big word. That means rain. Okay? So it's going to be very, very dry, and the animals are going to adapt to that, and the plants are going to adapt to that. The next vocabulary word is an interesting one. The word is succulents. Succulents. I don't know if you've heard this one before. Your parents might have one of these in their home. They are plants or flora that can store water in their leaves, their stems, or roots in order to adapt to dry environments. Succulents are plants that will hold that water for a really long time, days, months, years, so it can survive in dry areas like a desert. So this is a really important vocabulary word that you know what a succulent is. Okay, so let's dive into Big Bend National Park. Bend, not Big Ben, that's in London. Big Bend National Park in the state of Texas. This beautiful national park, if you look at this picture, you can see a person sitting up there on the rock looking at God's magnificent creation. This park was established to be preserved for the people and the enjoyment of the people in 1944. It's made up of deserts, mountains, and it has a beautiful meandering river that flows through it, and various elevations. That means there's a high part of the park and there's a lower part of the park. And if you remember, when we talked about elevation, we measure elevation based on sea level. So we're going to sea levels our base. We're not below sea level here, but we're going to be going up into some very high elevations when we talk about mountain ranges. Okay, so as you can see in this picture, there are large cliffs. We're going to talk about those cliffs. And there's that beautiful meandering river that flows in the park. If you look at the picture, you'll notice that there's going to be a few different ecosystems in this park. You're going to have a forest. You're going to have an aquatic ecosystem, everything that lives around that river. And then we talked about that desert. And there's going to be a whole different ecosystem with the desert. You're going to find that here in this magnificent park. The park is 801,163 acres. That's a large park in Texas. I apologize if this picture is a little fuzzy, but it does give you an idea of where Big Bend National Park is located. It actually got its name because of the way it bends. Look at that corner that's green in Texas, okay? You're talking about the south, because we're going down, southwest corner of Texas. And that green shaded area is where Big Bend National Park is. And it kind of looks like the bend in, like, say, your elbow. If your elbow is bent, that's kind of like that elbow bend of Texas, okay? And it's really interesting in the next map, when we get to it, you'll see that western line that Big Bend National Park follows, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide. Okay, said I was going to have it in the next slide. Look at this river. So this river is called the Rio Grande. It starts up in Colorado. Can you look up north and see that Colorado, where the Rocky Mountains are located? That's where it begins, in south central Colorado, and it flows south all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico, or current day Gulf of America, where it flows into. So it flows south from Colorado to the end of Texas into the Gulf. And if you see there, it actually is the southwestern border of Texas. It's what gives Texas that size and shape that makes that state. Sometimes if you see a border, like if you look at the border between New Mexico and Texas, you see it's a straight line. Those are not physical borders that make up the border of the state. The state drew a line and said, this is where New Mexico is going to be, and this is where Texas is going to be. But sometimes we use natural borders for our states, or even for our country. And that's what we did here. We used the border of this beautiful river, the Rio Grande, to serve as the border of Texas. It's actually an international border. It's between the United States of America and our neighbors to the south, Mexico. So that river is the border, part of the border, between the United States and Mexico. It is the fourth largest river in the country, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. So the Rio Grande River, I said, is the fourth largest river in the United States. Did you know that? Do you know what the largest river is in the United States? Waiting for you to shout out an answer, but there are no kids in a classroom right now. It happens to be, you're going to say it's the Mississippi, right? It's not. It's actually the Missouri River, or Missouri. The Missouri River begins at the Rocky Mountains of Montana and joins the Mississippi north of St. Louis, Missouri, and is the longest river in North America. Now, the Mississippi River is large too as well. The Mississippi River is 2,340 miles, but the Missouri River is 2,540 miles. So, longest one is the Missouri, Second one's Mississippi. Fourth one, Rio Grande. And that's where we pick up here. It makes the western border of Texas. We talked about that. And it makes up 196 miles of the river is part of the national park. So not the whole river is the national park, but 196 miles of it sure is. That river provides recreational opportunities, so you can go boating and kayaking and fishing, camping, and it also serves as an ecosystem for fish and plants that are all found around the river. So you'll notice when you looked at the previous pictures of the river, these large cliffs that make up a lot of the park. These are known as limestone cliffs. Now you heard the word limestone when we studied the Mammoth Cave National Park, and we talked about limestone being a natural resource. We're going to go back to the Mammoth Caves National Park when I see you face to face. But that same natural resource of limestone is also found right here in Big Bend National Park. They call it a geologist's paradise. Geologists are people who study rocks and minerals of our earth. They say it's a paradise for them at this national park because there's so many minerals and rocks and this limestone for them to study. The cliffs were actually formed once it was a deep ocean trough that over time, lots of time, due to the movement of the continents or continental movement, volcanic eruptions that happened, even some weather, that has shaped the present-day limestone cliffs in National Park. So they have been shaped over the period of, let's say, thousands of years. The cliffs rise 1,500 feet in the air. They're massive. Now, limestone, again, remember, is a natural resource that we have in our country. And this is an example of where you can find limestone. Here is a beautiful photograph of the cliffs, and you can see the water of the river down at the bottom and how it meanders through these incredibly high, majestic cliffs. Here's a beautiful photograph of the cliffs and then the river. This is obviously a lower part of the river flowing through and around the cliffs of Big Bend National Park. If you were to visit Big Bend National Park, there are many different ways that you can explore its beauty. First, you can hike one of the trails. This national park is really popular with hikers. It features over 80 hiking trails. You can also kayak, just like in South Carolina, with that national park that we saw, Congaree National Park. Well, you can also do that here on the Rio Grande River. And finally, if you want to drive through, there are scenic drives with stops where you can take wonderful photos. And there are even 8 off-road driving trails for 4-wheelers. Okay, let's move on to what are the flora in this national park. Now, when people think of Big Bend National Park, usually what comes to mind are beautiful views, some desert basins, rocky canyons, cliffs, a beautiful river, mountains. But when you step onto that dreamy piece of land, you want to watch your feet because you might get poked. There are several cacti within Big Bend National Park. Cacti is plural for cactus. So we're going to learn one of the cacti that grows in Big Bend National Park called the prickly pear. Here are 2 photos of the prickly pear cacti. At least 10 species of prickly pear cactus often are found throughout the park. They bloom with really pretty flowers from April to May. They also produce, here we go, edible fruits in mid-summer that you can pull off the cacti and actually eat. Now, those prickly pears, cacti might look soft and fuzzy, those little hairs that are on it, but they're actually spines. And they can definitely prick your skin. You can look at them, but don't touch them. The next flora in Big Bend National Park happens to be a succulent. That's one of our vocabulary words this week. So a succulent is a plant, if you remember, that retains and holds that water for long periods of time in their leaves, in their stems, in their roots. This is an example. So this is an agave plant. Agaves are an evergreen plant. What does evergreen mean? It stays green all throughout the year, no matter what the temperature. That chlorophyll doesn't change. And it's a succulent, which we talked about. Now the leaves, as they grow, they start to form like a rosette shape. If you look at the smaller photo, you can see that has many leaves. It starts to kind of create a circular bowl-like rosette, like rose-like, okay? The leaves are tipped with a hard spine. If you look up close, you can see that hard, prickly spine to it. Now, agaves bloom once in their lifetime, and then they die. Interesting fact. There are 11 species of agave in Texas, and 3 of these species are found in the national park. Another great fact about agave plants is that the juice liquid from inside the agave plant can actually be used as a sweetener. It's a healthy alternative to sugar in a lot of food products. You might even have some in your kitchen. The next flora in Big Bend National Park is also a succulent called the yucca plant. Now, yucca plants are tough evergreen plants. Evergreen again, they stay green all year round. They're native to the Americas. They're known for their sword-like shaped leaves and their ability to thrive in hot, dry conditions like Big Bend National Park. In fact, there are 4 species of yucca plants in this national park. Now, they all have trunks, and they elevate the leaves above the ground, and the trunk, as you can see in the picture, is often covered with a dry, dead leaves. These leaves are long, fibrous, and they're also spine-tipped. Now, you'll see a cream white flower that appears in late spring, and that flower produces a fleshy, dry fruit that has black seeds. Now, the Native Americans have used this plant. They ate the flower buds, petals, and the young stalks. Fruits and the seeds were also eaten. And then you can use their fibrous leaves to make cloth, rope, mats, sandals, and even baskets. And the root of the plant, you can make soap with it. And they did that as well. A very useful plant in Big Bend National Park. The last flora in Big Bend National Park that we're going to study today is called a jupner tree. Now, a jupner tree is common in Mexico, but only found in the United States in the mountain range that's in Big Bend National Park. So this jupner tree usually has a checkered or scaly bark that resembles like an alligator's skin. The tree always looks like it's in need of a drink of water. Not because it does, that's just the way the tree is. It's adapted to live in dry areas. The tree's conspicuous weeping branches give it like a wilted appearance, like it needs water, okay? And that is this type of tree. This tree, there are 3 jupiter species that exist in the park, and their bark can be used for, again, very useful, and the natives used it for sandals, for mats, and baskets. It's cones that grow on the tree. There are no photos here of the cones, but the cones are very small. They're like berries almost. And they would grind up the cones and use them to season meats or even to make beads and necklaces. Very interesting. So this is our first fauna in Big Bend National Park. This looks like a dog, but it is not. This is a coyote. Coyotes can be found in grasslands, deserts, forests, woodlands, swamps, and so they're very adaptive. They are carnivores, so we've talked about carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores. Carnivores will eat meat, okay? They are about half the size of wolves. So if you're thinking about how do they compare with a wolf, they're about half the size of a wolf. And they stand about 2 feet high at the shoulder and about 4 to 5 feet long they can grow up to. And they can weigh about 30 to 70 pounds. The female is smaller than the male coyote. Most of the time, coyotes hunt by themselves. They're lone hunters. They prey using their keen senses of hearing, sight, and smell. They eat rabbits, they eat hares, squirrels, mice, gophers, fish, bird eggs, and birds. Roadkill, they definitely can do that. Coyotes mate for life once they find their partner. And let's see here. The coyote's song is that howl or that high-pitched yipping. So you know the coyote ow sound. They make that sound. They can also bark and yap and growl. They use this to communicate and to help band together in case of danger. A mournful howl and an excited yip are many a sound to treasure and look at when you are visiting the national park. This is an interesting fauna that's located in Big Bend National Park. This is the desert bighorn sheep. Simple name, known for its horns, right? So an interesting fact about this fauna is that this type of sheep was nearly eradicated in the 1960s to where there were no longer any within Big Bend National Park. So the government decided that we need to do something in order to try and bring back the sheep to this area of Texas, and basically a program through the Texas State Park that's right next to Big Bend National Park introduced sheep to that area, particularly the bighorn sheep, in hopes that they would double, triple in number and eventually start to grow and wander their way over into Big Bend National Park to repopulate the park. Now, they were eradicated in the 60s only because of two factors. One, there was unregulated hunting. So some people were hunting perhaps for the horns. Another reason why they were eradicated was because a disease did break out and spread among the sheep that caused the death of a lot of them. So those two factors is why they started to dissipate. And now they are slowly, in 2010, the program was put into place. So we're in 2025. Hopefully, there are more bighorn sheep coming back to Big Bend National Park. Now, these sheep are specifically adapted to this environment. They can navigate the cliffs, those limestone cliffs, and the cliffs that are in the park really well. That rocky terrain, they can navigate it with speed because of their hooves, their particular specialized hooves that God granted them with. They can walk those rocky cliffs and evade predators that go after them, like mountain lions and bears, for example. They also have the ability to camouflage. The picture in there, the smaller picture, you can see a little bit of camouflage, but you can imagine if that rock were a little bit darker, that bighorn sheep would not be able to be seen. Now, they are generally smaller and lighter colored than the Rocky Mountain sheep that we're going to learn about once we get to that park. And both the males and the females grow horns. So the males are called rams, the females are called ewes. And the males and females both grow horns, but the male's horns are larger and they curl closer to the face. So I would say, based on the two pictures we have here, the one on the right, the larger picture, is going to be the male, and then the female is going to be in the smaller picture where her horns are a little bit like further away from the face. Okay, they do adapt really well to the southwestern lifestyle because it is dry. An interesting fact about their diet is that they are herbivores. They feed on grasses. So we talked about the coyote being a carnivore. This is a herbivore, eating grasses, shrubs, and cacti. That's important because the reason why these animals without disease can flourish in this area of the country is because they are water independent. They are highly adapted to the desert climate, and they're able to go several days without drinking water. They get their moisture from their diet. So if you're eating a plant that holds that water longer, you're going to benefit from that in your own diet. So that's how the bighorn sheep can survive in a dry, arid, mountainous, desert-like ecosystem. Okay, the last fauna we're going to look at for this park, there are many fauna within the Big Bend National Park. I'm going to highlight 3. This is our third one. This is an interesting animal. This is called the Texas horned lizard. Remember, I always say sometimes we just name things exactly as they look, like a red-winged blackbird, right? Or a bighorn sheep. This is a horned lizard. And you can imagine why just looking at the photo, right? Okay, so the Texas bighorn lizard right now is actually a threatened reptile in the state of Texas. So it does need protections. It does thrive in Big Bend National Park. It prefers grasslands, plains, and desert. So again, that's what the park has. Their diet consists of harvester ants, a particular type of ants. And a single Texas horned lizard can consume 30 to 100 ants per day. Since the 1960s, they've declined. Like I said, they're kind of threatened due to urbanization. Some people take them as pets. Sometimes their food source, those ants, are not there, so the horned lizard can't thrive. So that is sort of how that happens. Let's see here. But they defend themselves very well. I don't have a picture of it puffing up. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll put in an extra slide. They defend themselves by puffing up their body to appear larger. Or, listen to this, they can squirt blood from the corner of their eyes to confuse their predators. I'm not going to show a video of that one. But that's a very interesting way that this horned lizard protects itself. Let's see here. Efforts are made to make sure that people know that they are not to touch or take home this lizard as a pet. In fact, it is illegal to handle, possess, or transport a horned lizard without a specific license to research it in the state of Texas. So this is another one of the interesting fauna that you will find in Big Bend National Park. Okay, here we go. I found a photo of a puffed up Texas bighorn lizard. You can see how its body just is kind of like a big balloon in the middle part. That's how it would puff itself up. Okay, now for homework. All right, you want to take your template, have it printed out. It's okay if you don't have a color printer at home. Print out that template, fill in interesting facts. Get your basic facts of when the park was established, some fun facts about it. You can add the fauna and the flora to that page if you'd like. But here's the fun part about the homework. I've noticed that some of you like to draw or to color. So I thought we would take a weekend to do just a fun little art project where you get to be the artist. So here's your choice. If you just like to color, Then there is a coloring page for Big Bend National Park that is included with your homework assignment. You can color that in using crayons, colored pencils, markers. You could paint it if you'd like. That's fine. And that one has some additional flora and fauna that we did not even talk about in this lesson today, like a bear on that page. If that's fine, if you just want to color that in. Now, if you like to sketch or draw or just paint from a blank canvas or paper, then you can do that instead. You can pick a particular flora or a particular fauna that we learned about here today. Or if you want to do some research with your parents, you can find another flora or fauna that grows and lives within Big Bend National Park, and you can sketch it. You can draw it, paint it, color it, watercolor, whatever outlet you like to use as a young artist, you can do. And then bring that in on Monday. And we're going to end up punching a hole in it and putting it into our folder so that we can add it into our happy notebook to have with all of our other national park information. So on Monday, bring back your template, your 2 3x5 cards, and your artwork, whether it's the coloring page or something that you created. I look forward to seeing you all then. And until then, have a great weekend, and let's keep exploring the great parks that our country has within its borders. We are blessed. Have a wonderful weekend.